Getting ready to head down to downtown Dallas, the Sheraton Dallas Hotel, for the Sustainable Communities Conference. It's being put on by the EPA as part of the Sustainable Skylines Initiative, which is a national initiative, the City of Dallas. In fact, Mayor Leppert, I think, is going to be introducing the keynote today. So the city's on board. And then we've got the North Central Texas Council of Governments, which kind of brings together all of the various municipalities that make up the sprawling DFW region. And I'm just going to be sharing what I find interesting over the next few days, so I hope you find it interesting as well.
Our goal very simply is to be at the forefront. Of what's happening from an environmental standpoint. I can tell you that we think that's exactly the right thing to do. We have an obligation to the taxpayers and the citizens of the city of Dallas, but I'll also tell you that we believe that's exactly what we should be doing to position our city for growth in an economy of the future. We think that there's an awful lot of innovative things that are happening here from an environmental standpoint. Some of those may actually be quite simple, clearly like buying green power. Sometimes you don't have to have engineers spend years and years to make an achievement. In Dallas, we annually purchase about 334 million kilowatt hours of renewable power. That primarily comes from wind, and that's about 40% of our total energy purchases. We also committed to buying green vehicles. The first alternative vehicle that we purchased was back in 1992, and 10 years later, we bought our first biodiesel vehicle. Today, about 2,000 of our vehicles fall into that alternative category, and that's about 40% of our fleet. So it's a number that we're awfully proud of and we continue to build. In fact, it is the largest green fleet of any place in Texas. As was mentioned too, we're also pushing hard on green building. It's something that I think is awfully important, not based on my time as mayor, but really my time being involved in the private sector. I think all of you are aware that the challenge in buildings, literally from construction all the way through to operations, is the one area of the economy that consumes more energy than anything else. And in fact, buildings are the single largest contributor to climate change anywhere in the country. This last year, we passed in one of only the first 2 cities anywhere in the nation, and the largest one that moved forward on taking green building policies and span all of the buildings in the city. So not just public, but also private, not just commercial, but residential, and not just the large buildings, but the small buildings too. For over a decade, the DFW areas, too many places in the nation, have not been in compliance with EPA's clean air standards. Said another way, they call it non-attainment. We simply say that it's crappy air. But we've got a number of programs in place because our goal is to change that and change it just as rapidly as we can.
We're going to have to change. We got some sense of that last year when oil prices spiked, and the only thing that brought them down was the onset of whatever we're calling this, the Great Recession or whatever it is. We got some sense of that. We got some sense of the kind of changes that was going to happen as a result. Today, in fact, the newspapers carry the story that across the country, the usage of public transportation last year was the highest that it's been since 1956. It set a new 52-year high as people began, for the first time since we invented automobile, to park their cars. We drove less last year than we drove the year before, and that hasn't happened. That change in the availability, in particular of oil, and the continued high price is one of the new realities that we confront. And the other one, even more important, is the fact that over the last few years, it's become extraordinarily clear to people paying attention that global warming is not only real, but that it's happening at a much more rapid pace and on a much larger scale than we thought even a few years ago. The implications, among other things, and this is particularly important for people involved in communities and civic government, the implications are that all the things that we've built to deal with the world, to exist in the world that we used to inhabit, no longer work as well. That is, if your zoning plan was built on a 100-year floodplain that now floods every couple of years, okay, that's a problem. I think that we are entering an era now when those localities and communities are going to be revived in all kinds of interesting and about the logic of the situation in which we find ourselves. The thing that has underwritten the endless globalization and the endless physical sprawl that we see around us is precisely that cheap fossil fuel that we now have to figure out how to decouple ourselves from. And as we do, the natural consequence will be a kind of powerful localization of our economies and our lives. If you look closely, you can see it already beginning to start to happen. Pick your commodity. Food. Fastest growing part of our food economy in the last decade in this country has been local farmers markets. So probably many of your communities have them. If they don't, they will soon. The number has doubled and then doubled again in the last decade. Sales have been growing 12 or 15% a year. That's good news ecologically. It takes a lot less energy to move a tomato 5 miles than 5,000 miles. It's probably good from a kind of eating standpoint. I traveled 2,000 miles to get here today. I know how I feel. That's how tomato feels also when it arrives. But it's definitely good news, and this sort of illustrates the real possibilities. It's definitely good news from a community standpoint. Okay? Think about the different. You all been, a couple years ago, Paris sociologists followed shoppers. First around supermarket, then around a farmer's market. Now, you all been to the supermarket, you know how it works. You walk in, you fall into a light trance, you visit the Stations of the Cross around the outside of the supermarket, you emerge with the same basket of items. That's it. Okay, it's not a very ennobling process. When they followed people around the farmer's market, they found on average that they were having 10 times more conversations per visit. It's a very big change. They're beginning to rebuild some of that web of community that vanished as we sprawled out across the countryside. You can do just the same argument with almost any commodity you want to name. Energy itself being a good one. The idea that we're going to have super centralized energy sources like we've had in the past is, I think, no longer the future. The smartest engineers I know talk obsessively about distributed generation, about the possibility of doing things in much more scattered and local areas, right down to the very local. I mean, I have solar panels all over my roof. I'm tied into the grid. So I, on a sunny day, am a utility, you know. My neighbor is cooling his beer with the sunshine that falls on my shingles, okay? Which is a nice way of doing it. And in the end, not only connect people up, it makes us far less vulnerable than we are at the moment with this system that, if you think about it very carefully, doesn't leave us much margin for the kind of trouble that's coming. The moment that we've arrived at isn't really one where we get to choose whether we want to go forward or not, okay? Any more than sort of when you're at the brink of the waterfall, you get to make up your mind. We're going over, you know. The question is how gracefully we're going to do it. And we'll do it far more gracefully if, instead of trying to hold on to all the things that we're used to in the past, we make the plunge with some daring and some courage in the direction of what's obviously coming in the future.
What can marketing do, whether it's television, through any media, whether it's web or TV, or what do you think has to change for that industry to really be a good partner in the bigger sustainability movement?
Be as honest as possible. The truth hurts, and I think if certain individuals knew an iota of what their impact was on individuals, communities, and just the rest of the world, that maybe I'd like to give them the benefit of the doubt and expect the better of people, that they would choose better next time. And I believe it's up to the media to portray the truth and to educate us.